Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Before you invest, you must have an emergency fund, and here's why. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about something I'm very passionate about, and that is the importance of having an emergency fund well before you ever start investing. Now, I'm going to cover why you need this fund, how much you might want to consider building up and actually saving and putting by. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to show you exactly how much I have in my emergency fund to this day, and ultimately how I built that pot up using some very simple and easy methods which you can all go on to use. Now, I also know for many new and young investors, the first thing you want to do is download eToro, Trading 212, and start hand picking those stocks, feeling the rush of the stock market, and ultimately you want to begin growing your funds as soon as possible. Now, I totally get it, and it is amazing that you want to start investing as early as possible, and that's what we should all look to do. But in the long run, it is counterproductive and potentially damaging to your investment journey if you do not have an emergency fund in place, and here's why. If the last 18 months has taught us anything, it's the importance of creating financial security.
Storms of life, but I mean, really, it is a good metaphor. When they come at you, it's a different thing to face that with a little bit of a pile of money.
Having that safety net and planning for the worst, because no one could have predicted COVID-19, and as a result, many were financially hit hard and still have not recovered to this day because they had no emergency fund in place. As Warren Buffett would say, only when the tide goes out, you discover who's been swimming naked, and that is totally true. So let's start by addressing the what and the why behind needing an emergency fund. Okay, so what is an emergency fund? Well, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a pot of money which is set aside for financial emergencies. Those are unexpected rainy days, such as total loss of income, unemployment.
You're a bit out of your depth here, and with regret, you're fired.
Health issues where you may incur costs for medical care, or perhaps that family car that's been carrying 180,000 miles on the clock and has decided the only journey it is willing to take is down to the local scrapyard to put it out of its misery. These are all emergencies that we never want to happen, but ultimately we do need to plan for them. Now, the amount in which you set aside will vary depending on your personal circumstances, of course, because a family of four with a mortgage, say, and living expenses will of course need a much larger pot opposed to a single person living on their own with no overheads. There's minimal outgoing, so there's going to be two different scenarios here. However, I do believe there is a rule of thumb we should all aim for, and that is to aim to have an emergency pot for at least 3 to 6 months of total expenses covered. Let's now look at the why, but before we do, I hear some of you ask, Aaron, do I really need to save for an emergency fund? Is it really necessary to plan for the might never happen situations?
Get some money. Get you some money. It's called an emergency fund as one of your first steps. Get you some money.
There's no excitement in having money just sitting in an account doing nothing. I totally get it. I feel you. But ultimately, we need to be sensible. We need to be looking at this with a long-term mindset, wanting a safe and secure financial future for not only ourselves, but also our families. So the main reasons why it's so important to save and build up your emergency fund first is because of the following. Let's say you begin pumping all your money into savings and investments first. Then boom, an emergency happens where you need instant and accessible cash to deal with that emergency. Now, if you'd have pumped all your money into the stock market, for example, and you're currently in minus equity, sitting on a loss due to a market drop, that's a double financial hit to you, which ultimately should have been avoided, because not only are you now withdrawing on a loss, you now have to use your investment funds to pay for that emergency, which ultimately you should have had funds set aside for. So, pow, you're on a double loss, but you're back at square one. In fact, you're not even back at square one. You're on a minus square one times 10. Another dark hole that your emergency fund will allow you to avoid is taking out further debt, negatively compounding yourself into a worse financial situation. Research done by Yorkshire Building Society shows that more than 1 in 10 UK adults have no savings at all. 19% of UK adults having less than £100 in savings, and 26% having less than £500. So what I want to stress is this can be avoided if you get your priorities right from the off. It's also shocking to know that the average UK adult holds around £30,575 worth of debt. This ultimately is a result of many adults not having a safety net in place, and therefore the vicious financial circle continues for many. My recommendation is it's time to get your act together. Practice self-discipline and start building that emergency fund. It's simple. Okay, so let's say you've taken on board what I've said so far, and I really hope you have, but how and where do I begin? First things first, it's that time to sit down and work out exactly what your weekly or monthly outgoings are. That's first thing to do. On top of this, I would then be looking to add at least 10% contingency buffer on top of your total outgoings. So for example, if your total monthly expenses are £1,000, then I would be looking to save a minimum of 3 months expenses plus that additional 10% on top. Therefore looking to save £3,000 and then the additional 10% on top for each month, bringing your total emergency fund to £3,300. Now, if you can, I would definitely try and achieve 6 months just for that extra financial comfort if you can go on and do that. Now, I'd recommend you start by setting up standing orders weekly or monthly so everything becomes automated. The aim is to build this up as quickly as possible, so once you achieve a certain level of comfort within your emergency fund, you can then of course go on to invest the excess back into your investments and start that journey. So how did I build up my emergency fund? How much do I have and what are my top tips? Well, before I share with you my personal approach, I want to give you some good news, especially if you've got itchy feet, is that yes, you can invest and save alongside building up your emergency fund. But you need to stick around to the end because I'm going to share with you how you can do that using some simple and effective methods. So watch till the end of the video. Now, how much do I have saved in my emergency fund? How much did I contribute and how long did it take me to achieve what I have today? Currently, I have £11,000 in my emergency fund, which essentially covers all of our family expenses for around about 6 months. It gives us around about £1,800 per month, so the UK's average salary, and that's 6 months where we do not have to worry about any financial outgoings, anything like that. So it's total security for 6 months. Now, that's exactly what I wanted to achieve, but how long did it take me to get to that? Well, I'm going to share with you what I contributed. So it's taken me around about 6 years where I've continuously put £120 each month, so it's £30 a week, into my emergency fund. And this has generated me a total of £8,640 towards that fund. Additionally, I have used other sources of income through my business, which typically come by way of lump sum, to top that up, bringing me to a total of £11,000. Now, currently I no longer contribute to my emergency fund because the aim was to always achieve total financial security for a period of 6 months. So instead of contributing to my emergency fund, I now have a secondary pot, which is called a maintenance pot. Now, this pot has 4,270 within it and still growing. Now, for those of you wondering what my maintenance pot is, I shall be doing a separate video soon, and what I'll do is somewhere on the screen I'll include a link once it's gone live so you can go on to find out what my secondary pot is about and how I use it. So finally, let's take a look at some of my top tips and personal methods in order to build up your emergency fund fast. But before we do, for those of you that may be in some debt, then in order of which I recommend will differ for you. As a priority, if you do hold debt, is to reduce this and clear it. So therefore, perhaps use a 70-30 rule where 70% goes towards clearing your debt and 30% goes in towards your emergency fund. So I'm now going to base this, you have no debt. So let's take a look at the steps that you can go on to implement and bulk out your emergency fund fast. So step 1, I call 6 months of focus. This is where for the next 6 months, you stop all standing orders into your savings and investments, and you basically go hard and put all of your money into your emergency fund. So you double down for the next 6 months, and that's step 1. Step 2 is reduce and replace. So what do I mean? Well, it's time to take a look at your outgoings, and cut back on the Netflix, the Amazon Prime, Prime Video, Spotify, Now TV, and any unwanted memberships basically. Gain back those $7.99 a month, pump them straight into your emergency fund. Step 3 is round up all excess spending. So both in card transactions and in physical cash, there are many banks which offer like a roundup system now where you can basically round it up to the nearest pound. But my personal preference is to use a money and saving investing platform such as Moneybucks or Monzo. just to name a couple. And if you want to know more, check out my video on Moneybox, which I'll include around here somewhere, and that's also on YouTube, and that explains a little bit more Moneybox. PS, there's no sponsorship, I just really like the platform. In regards to physical cash, I use a rule of thumb. So if you're using cash to perhaps fill up your car or whatever it might be, you're going into the shop, I basically aim to spend a few less than the note that I have. So if I have £20, for example, I might spend 17 or 18 pound on fuel, so I get £2 cash back, and that basically goes into a separate cash jar, which I then change up at the end of the year. Step 4, justification. Being honest with yourself. Can you really afford it, and could you buy it twice?
Black Mercedes, because that's what I always wanted. Black Mercedes and some nice wheels. Guy was like 150. Write the check. And I come home, my father's like, that's nice, where's mine? I was like, you know what, you made me who I am, jump in. So we ride, told the guy, I want another one, same.
2 questions you need to continuously ask yourself when you buy something materialistic, for example. If the answer is no, then do not buy it, and instead hop onto your savings or banking app and basically just transfer yourself some additional funds into that emergency fund. By doing that, you're kind of breaking the bad habit and you're actually replacing it with a good financial habit. Also, it reduces the temptation of you walking back into the shop and basically buying things that you just don't need. Step 5, and probably the most important in order to compound your emergency fund the quickest, and that is live on less, save the rest. It's time to be humble and forget about what other people are doing. You know, don't keep up with the Joneses, because ultimately your sacrifice now in the long term of living on less will pay dividends in the long term towards your financial future. I really hope this video has offered some value, and I would welcome any comments below. And ultimately, saving for an emergency fund is so important, especially when we look at what's happened and we never know what's around the corner. So if you could smash the like button, please do share, subscribe if you enjoy my content, and until the next video, I will see you all very soon.